Ottawa's favorite tool event is back. Tool Fest, presented by Preston Hardware, is the ultimate destination for tool enthusiasts, hobbyists, and professionals. Get unbeatable deals on the latest tools, discounts up to 84%, over 80 of North America's top manufacturers like Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, and Bosch. Free admission, free parking, plus over $200,000 in giveaways. It's where tool lovers gear up. Preston Hardware's Tool Fest, Infinity Convention Center, today and tomorrow, 9 to 4. Info at toolfest.ca.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
Yeah, there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Hello, and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the spiciest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they had transpired today? I'm your co-host, Sarah Sahagian.
And I'm your other co-host, Sadaf Hassan. Now, before we dive into today's subject, we've got a little content warning for you. This episode discusses eating disorders, body image, and disordered eating. If that's not for you, that's okay. We've got tons of episodes in our archive for you to check out. We'll also have resources linked in today's show notes. Okay, sir, I'm going to start this episode with something that I think we are increasingly told we're not supposed to say. I'm worried about Ariana Grande. I said it. And apparently just saying that about a celebrity's appearance now requires like 20 disclaimers. So here's mine. I don't know Ariana Grande. Neither does Sarah. We're not her doctors. We don't know what she eats, what medications she takes, whether she's got an eating disorder, or if there is something else happening entirely, knock on wood. But we've also got eyes. Ariana looks dramatically different than she did several years ago. A lot of people have noticed it. I'm sure it's a conversation in many of your group chats and at the office. A lot of people are worried. And lately, the response to that concern has increasingly been, stop talking about women's bodies. Don't do that. And like, I get it, but we've spent decades picking apart female celebrities because they gained like 5 pounds. You know, I still remember when Jessica Simpson performed at that outdoor festival and had gained, maybe 10 pounds, maybe, and was crucified. We know commenting on people's weight can be cruel, it can be invasive, actively harmful. But here's the thing I think we both keep getting stuck on. What if something really is wrong? At what point does don't comment on people's bodies stop being compassionate and just become this way of pretending we can't actually see something that's concerning and also has an impact on the people seeing it, right? I think a key distinction is basically what this whole episode is going to be about. Quote, Ariana Grande has anorexia is a diagnosis, but Ariana Grande's appearance has changed dramatically and I hope she's okay. That is an observation and a concern. Those are not the same sentences. So today I want to talk about Ariana, but I also want to go backwards to Karen Carpenter, whose death completely changed the way the public understood eating disorders. And then we're going to go through some of the other famous women and increasingly famous men who've told us what it's actually like to live with one. So we're going to go through it all. It's not going to be an easy episode. Again, if that's not comfortable for you, it's a good time to check out. Go through your feed, check out another episode. Now, Sarah, before we dive in, what do you make about the conversation around Ariana right now and the policing around how we discuss it?
Yeah, it is interesting because there is a lot of policing. We're not really allowed to talk about body, which is interesting because it's not the only thing that you see when you see a person, but it is the first thing you see, right? That is your personality and everything else about you. Your talent is housed in a body, right? So it's kind of like when people didn't want to talk, when white people didn't want to talk about race in the 90s and they said, I don't see color, right? Like, I don't see body, right? Body doesn't exist. Like, yes, it does. There are different bodies. And is there a spectrum of what is healthy? Absolutely. Does BMI tell us if somebody's healthy, whether it's higher than what BMI says that it should be or lower? Not necessarily. No, absolutely. For sure, we are not Ariana's doctors, but we also are people who've been looking at this woman for a very long time. And we can see that her appearance has dramatically changed. That's one thing for sure. But also, it's just so funny that now weight loss is in many ways bigger than ever with weight loss drugs. And yet we're not supposed to talk about people's bodies. But weight loss is something that happens to your body. So it's just very weird. And I think it does feel a little bit conspiratorial, right? Like everyone wants you to lose weight and go into debt to lose weight, really, in some cases, because these drugs can be very expensive, and not talk about it or talk about the pressures that are making you want to do that. Like the fact that thin is really in Hollywood. It's in to the point where it's considered rude to be concerned that a celebrity might have an eating disorder.
Yes, exactly. Well put. I think it's tricky too, because of course, these people don't owe us anything, but at the same time, and I think this is where I personally find it hard to discuss. I don't want to piss anybody off, but Ariana is on a massive platform, right? And she's actively touring. She was just touring in Montreal. I think she's in New York right now. And she also released a music video. We talked about this in a previous Reheat episode for her new song, Pedal. And I was really disturbed when I saw the music video because it felt like they were kind of flaunting her body in the state that it is right now. You know, she was dressed in certain outfits and dresses that really showed off her rib cage and her collarbone. And it kind of felt like they were trying to reclaim it in some kind of way. Didn't really understand what the goal was. And that's where I get uncomfortable. And I'm not saying like we got to protect the children. I'm just saying, what is the objective at that point, right? Like it's not healthy for anyone, but it's also just not healthy for her. Like it just scares me. You know, then it feels like you're setting a whole new standard. And I don't know. I find that very disconcerting.
Yeah, and you are setting a whole new standard, right? We do know that when people are, they've done studies to show that when people are exposed to images of pretty much exclusively skinny women held up as beauty icons, then eating disorders go up, right? And in places where that is not the case, eating disorders are less common. It's not that they're non-existent, but they're less common. So we do know that that matters. And there's just so little body diversity now in entertainment compared to 3 years ago, right? It's so stark. If you do a comparison, it's incredibly stark. And we're getting to the point where so many people are speaking really proudly about their weight loss drugs, which is fine. You know what? Actually, like these are drugs that can be prescribed for a real reason. If you need to be on them, it's totally fine. But it's gotten to the point where I feel like there's so much pressure just to take these drugs to be skinny, right? Amy Schumer is one where, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if she kind of has an eating disorder, even though she's not as thin as Ariana, because she's always talking about her body now and always showing you pictures of her body. And I just feel like, what is this preoccupation from someone who didn't previously have that preoccupation? You've seen a real psychological shift in her.
Yeah, I completely agree. God, even on, you guys know I love my Bravo shows, quite a few reality stars over there very recently have all proudly admitted to using GLP-1s. And here's the thing, I'm not actually big on anti-GLP-1. What worries me is when I'm already seeing a very thin body, then take it. And that's what I'm seeing with these Bravo stars. They were already thin. And then they take the GLP-1s and then they look, I'm sorry to say, skeletal. And I just am alarmed by that. Like I think, oh Jesus, like this new standard is impossible. And frankly, it's just going to make you sick. It's going to make you sick. And as you mentioned earlier, it's expensive. If you even want to get, let's say, one vial of, let's say, Wegovy, that's going to charge you about $300 a pop. That's wild. That's in Canadian dollars. It's expensive too. So there's that whole part of it. But anyway. Okay, let's dive into this conversation, guys. So we're going to start with Ariana. Just do a little bit of a refresher in case you don't already know what's happening over here. Now, the conversation about her appearance has been happening for actually several years now, but obviously it's become really intense lately. She looks significantly thinner than she did earlier in her career, and people have been openly expressing concern about her health. I don't think it's useful to pretend that isn't happening. We just went over that and why we feel that way. But what makes the conversation especially complicated, I think, is that Ariana has asked people to stop commenting on her body. So back in 2023, after people started comparing her appearance to older photos and saying she looked healthier before, Ariana posted a TikTok. She explained that the version of her body people were pointing to as her healthy body actually corresponded with the period when she was on antidepressants and drinking while taking them. She was eating poorly and just generally at one of the lowest points in her life. In other words, people were looking at photos of Ariana and congratulating her on a body that actually was really unhealthy and at a time when she wasn't feeling well. That's how much we can't really know what's going on, right? But I also don't think this idea that you can't diagnose health from a photo means a person's physical condition can never be visibly concerning. It can be. Those ideas have become super conflated online. On social media, this conversation is heated. It has been for quite some time. There's obviously illnesses that change the way people look. It's literally one of the ways people around someone may realize that something is wrong. But I think the ethical problem isn't so much noticing, it's believing that noticing gives you this access to somebody's diagnosis, right? And then their treatment and then their private life. During the Wicked press tour, with, might I remind everybody, a very thin Cynthia Erivo on her arm, Ariana addressed the public discussion about her body. She described the scrutiny of people's bodies as being dangerous, which is also true, right? I think it can exacerbate what you're feeling already. At the same time, I remember, because this was just literally months ago, that there were theories that both of these women were competitively starving themselves, which, if you've never heard about, is a real thing that can happen. Obviously, we don't know if that was happening with these women, but because they had such a close relationship on the press tour and they were both looking alarmingly thin and seemingly getting thinner as the movies carried on and the press tour went on, there was this idea that they were encouraging each other to hang in there during this disorder that they might have both shared, which is really scary, especially because, again, it was playing out right in front of us every day. I remember in the second Wicked movie, they had like gemstones decorating Ariana's collarbone, which kind of shone a light specifically on how thin she was and hollowed out there. I don't know. I found it very jarring. Yeah, so we've got basically these two realities existing at once. This is how I look at it. So Ariana has asked people not to scrutinize her body, and there are people looking at her who are genuinely worried about her. So what do you do with that? And this is where I want to bring in Karen Carpenter. And I'm sure a lot of you have never heard that name before, and some of you probably can never forget that name. We're going to get into the A to Z of it. But Sarah, I want to hear from you. When did you first hear about Karen? How do you remember her, if at all?
Okay, so this is how I discovered Karen Carpenter. I discovered her by watching my childhood obsession biography on Annie. Such a good show. I do really credit it for building both my love of history and Hollywood gossip. Because
Can I tell you? Yeah. Same. This is how I know we're friends, because I had the same addiction with biography.
Great series that really just taught you how to be a culturally aware person, because they'd be like, watch this biography on Mata Hari. Okay, watch this biography on Tom Cruise. All right, just watch it all. Watch it all.
Back to back.
Exactly. Know about everything. I love it. I actually really think that I owe a lot to A&E. I might tear up talking about A&E. And that is how I discovered her. I watched the A&E biography of Karen Carpenter. And then I asked my mom about Karen Carpenter because my mom had grown up listening to the Carpenters, which I realized just from the dates when they were popular that was likely the case. So I talked to her about it. Yeah, it's a really tragic story. She was so talented, really, really a very talented person. And she's a talented person who should not have defined herself by her body, but we know that eating disorders can happen to anyone and they can be lethal. So when did you first discover her?
You know what? I think it was very similar for me because I can't remember exactly. God, maybe it was the same biography.
It might
episode,
have been.
Honestly, because I was addicted to that.
On the same day?
Yeah, soulmates, you and I.
I know.
I know that I watched something back then when I was probably too young, honestly, to really understand it all. But it was a biography about her, yes. And I remember some Carpenter's songs. Not even I remember, but they're still around. The music anyway. And then I remember reading about her over the years and how much she is associated with what happened to her physically, which is wild because the Carpenters were huge. So the fact that that actually supersedes the music is kind of wild to me, right? And I think she's become this go-to phrase over the years when you're talking about somebody who's not well and you're not going to address it, or if you're just talking about a really thin body. And I feel bad about that. It's almost like she's become, I don't even know, like a slur in that sense, like a bad word for women's health. And I hate that. But I know that is the case for a lot of people. We're going to get into why. Now, for anyone younger who mainly knows her name, like me for so many years, as someone associated with anorexia, I want to really emphasize how huge she was. And you know what? We'll link to some classic Carpenter songs in the show notes. So, give those a listen if you haven't heard them before. But Karen and her older brother, Richard, made up the Carpenters, which I love. A sibling band, classic. They were one of the defining pop acts of the 70s. So they had hits like Close to You, We've Only Just Begun, Rainy Days and Mondays, Superstar, Yesterday Once More. If you don't know them, ask your parents, your grandparents. They will probably have like a favorite song. Now, Karen also had one of those voices that you hear once, and I think you immediately know forever. It's quite distinct. The Carpenters had this very polished, wholesome image at a moment when rock music was really taking over. It was louder, it was dirtier, it was rebellious. It was that era. And again, it was the 70s. But somehow these two very clean-cut sibs singing melancholy pop became massive. They won 3 Grammys. They had a massive run of hits throughout that decade. And here's something that I also feel like people really forget. Karen was a drummer, and she was a very good drummer, okay? She actually originally thought of herself primarily as a drummer, but because her voice was so unique, so extraordinary, she kept getting pulled out from behind her drum and placed at the front of the stage, which I really love. Like, that alone is a really cool story. But yeah, that also means, though, that she went from being behind the scenes to being very much the face of the band, right? And being looked at all the time. And I think that shift is really important to think about, especially because Karen had struggled with her body image before getting famous. She'd dieted a lot as a teenager, we know that. And as the band got more famous, she became more visible, of course. And then her preoccupation with her weight just got more and more intense, which is logical. It makes sense. Accounts of her life describe photos, reviews, and comments about her appearance having this massive effect on her. And her dieting eventually got to a point where it was just really dangerous. So by 1975, Karen was seriously ill. If you can handle it, you can look up photos of her and you will see what we mean, because saying it is one thing, but if you feel comfortable enough, her appearance is quite difficult to take in. I will give you a read on just how bad, if that's something you're comfortable with. If you don't want to hear it, you can fast forward a few seconds. But earlier on, she weighed about 120 pounds, right? That was kind of her default weight. But as her struggle got worse and worse, she dropped to about 77 pounds. That's how small she was. And if you look at photos of her at events and the Grammys and performing, oh my God, I don't even know how she was standing there. Like, it's jarring how ill she looked. So 1975, she collapsed during a performance, and the Carpenters had to cancel major tour dates. But here's the thing. At the time, the public barely even knew the term anorexia, right? And barely understood what it was, how it can happen. Richard, her brother, would describe it as exhaustion. That was kind of their cover up, essentially. And I think that's really interesting because this was the 70s, right? And even now, the go-to for a celeb who is unwell but doesn't want to say what they're going through is exhaustion. And that's interesting. Yeah. I would love to be able to just say that, like, if you're calling into work, you're like, I'm just exhausted.
I have exhaustion. I have definitely had exhaustion points in my life, but I just couldn't take a break, right? Like, I mean, exactly. Every mom I see at school drop off has exhaustion, right? I mean, we're not getting IVs for it. Maybe we should be. I actually don't begrudge people the medical attention because, like, I probably do need a B12 shot, and I probably do need like
Get
a few
an
days
iron
of
infusion,
bed rest.
Sarah. We need iron infusion.
I know. I probably do need all those things. So do all the women I know, right? You do. My mom friends do. Everyone does. But I guess we somehow survive without it.
Can you believe? I'm exhausted every day.
I know.
Ay. Okay, now there's a telling interview, and again, we will link this in the show notes, but Karen did it with the BBC in 1981. It's very uncomfortable to watch. So again, trigger warning. The interviewer directly asks her about reports that she has anorexia. He describes it as the slimmer's disease. Like, I've never heard that since, ever.
Are British people, because they are into euphemisms, is it just that, or does he think he's being clever? I don't know, because there are also some journalists who just think they're too clever for their own good. But that is weird.
It's weird, but I think it does say a lot. Like, now you would never, right? Because it almost sounds like he's poking fun because it's such a goofy label. I don't know. It's hilarious. But I think also maybe it felt like saying the word was too much, too big. We don't want to say, because frankly, it's a big thing that he actually confronted her on it, right? So many people were not actually saying it. So good on him for that. I don't like the way he did it. And I don't like the word. But anyway, so he starts discussing her weight. And listen, even though I think it's good that he brought it up finally after nobody had, there are ways that journalists should be handling these conversations and ways they shouldn't. I don't think he went about it in the smoothest way. Karen looks super uncomfortable. Anybody would be, right? When someone is needling you about your body. When he asks about the rumors, Karen says, "No, I was just pooped. I was tired out." Richard eventually steps in. He tries to shut down the questioning. What's clear is that people could see something was happening, right? They just didn't really understand what they were seeing. Again, anorexia, relatively not a new term, but it certainly wasn't mainstream like it is now. And I think Karen was afraid maybe of how things might go if people knew the truth. I think it's just a sad irony because she looked clearly deeply unwell. So even though they weren't saying what it was out there. It wasn't a secret, right? Sir, what do you make of this period for her and the way that she worked so hard to keep this quiet, but obviously wasn't? She just was wearing this.
It's a mental illness that has, a very obvious physical manifestations. And so I do feel bad for anyone who wants to go through this in private because it's very hard, right? I mean, it is sometimes possible with other mental illnesses not to tell people you're going through it if you feel like it would be too traumatic for you to discuss it with strangers, which I get. I do get that. But yes, you're a famous person and also people can see you. So you can't really deny it. This is just why fame is so tricky. And I understand that a lot of people want it. I mean, we could have a debate about whether the Carpenters knew what they were getting into and whether Karen specifically knew what she was getting into. But the minute something goes wrong in your life, you get into these situations that if anyone else did this to you, this would just be abusive, right? If somebody came up to you at a party and was like, "You're anorexic," we all know, tell us about being anorexic, right? That would just be abusive behavior. But because you're famous, fair enough. Like you are part of the discourse. And I understand that there is a difference for a public person and that also you are creating social norms and you're a role model to adults and to children. So I understand why people ask about it, but also the toll on the individuals be hard. So fame, this is why I feel like if you really understand fame, you probably don't want to be quite as famous as the Carpenters were. Today I was reading something that Carrie Russell was talking about how she and Matthew Rhys are the perfect level of famous.
I saw that cover story too.
Yeah.
I loved it.
How she loves how famous they are. She's like, yeah, sometimes we can get a table more easily at a restaurant, but people don't really know who we are most of the time. Like, and also I might not be able to get a dress for an award show, but that's okay. And I'm like,
I
okay,
love that.
Perfect level of famous. You get to work, you get to be rich, but you aren't anyone's favorite pop star and you're not on their bedroom wall. That's when fame gets to a point where you're just a public persona. You're almost not even a person like Ariana Grande or Karen.
Yeah. I wonder too, because obviously since the 00s and I think since the era of our pop stars, millennials with like the Britneys and again, like the Jessica Simpsons, as I mentioned, Obviously, there was so much talk, and we'll talk about this more in a second, but so much talk about what your body should look like. And we knew that all these stars were getting pressured to lose weight. I'm so curious. We don't have enough details on what this was like back in the 70s and for Karen. But of course, it went past a point where I think even her team would be like, yeah, that's great. Keep losing. But I wonder what the conversation was behind the scenes so desperately with her team. One interesting thing that I do want to add in is that, so 2 years after her death, this is really interesting. A group of doctors and therapists, they specialized in eating disorders, right? This was their whole thing. They lobbied the Food and Drug Administration to ban over-the-counter sales of a drug that she had reportedly been taking to keep from gaining weight. That drug, you might remember this, or I think you'll remember this, Ipecac. This was pretty infamous way back when. And God, I actually haven't heard it in a long time.
Was that a weight loss drug initially?
So Ipecac originally was meant to just cause vomiting if you've like swallowed a poison or something you shouldn't have, right? So, but then a lot of people in the 70s and 80s were using it to lose weight and to help them throw up after they'd eaten a lot. But here's the thing, obviously by this time she had quite a weak heart. So the belief is that it was just too taxing on her body at that point. Her therapist actually spoke to the New York Times, and he said he felt like thousands of American women were abusing Ipecac for the same reason. And that at that point, people didn't really know that it was being abused to the level that it was. That's pretty scary. It's interesting to me. I just realized that we haven't really talked about that drug in a really long time. And now we're at the GLP-1 stage. It's quite dark, huh?
I have a question about Ipecac just in general. Was this ever a social problem that people were accidentally consistently ingesting poison? Like, was this a daily problem and you needed to be able to get this over the counter? Because if I ingested poison or my child ingested poison, my first instinct would be emergency room, right? And now that might be urban privilege, I guess, if you're a rural person, if you're like a farmer and maybe your kid accidentally eats some fertilizer you didn't want them to eat. Like, I do actually see a world where maybe you do need this for certain people, but it's interesting that this was over the counter and the pharmacies were like, oh yeah, this woman ate poison again. I'm just going to give her more Ipecac. Like,
I know, it's so incomprehensible. Like, I think that's how much of a different time it was, right? Like, moms would buy it and keep it on the cupboard just in case. But it's like, what was the just in case? You're so right.
I know. Why are you supervising your children so poorly that you're like, well, obviously every good mom has Ipecac for when my kid eats poison, right? It's like, maybe just make sure they don't eat poison. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe everything was poisonous back in the 70s. The
More
kids
things
would look
were.
in the walls. Yeah.
Well, that's true. There was lead and lots of stuff. I mean, yeah, I feel like maybe this was harm reduction. We lived in a different world. So actually, fair enough. You needed the Ipecac.
Well, I'll tell you, like, no, you can't get it. Like, the stores don't sell it. It's not going to be on your mom's kitchen cupboard. But it was that, right? I'm not saying it was at the level of Advil, but close, you know? So that's interesting to me, too, that people were finding what they could. And I think it was one of those, I don't want to call it a whisper network, but it kind of was. Like, women would know, oh, you're using Ipecac to lose a few pounds for next Friday. I'm going to do the same thing. So, and then Karen, that's the belief that that's what was happening. So it's quite dark, but I think I hate saying bright side, but it's a silver lining to what happened, that after this, all of these doctors were working so hard because of what happened to her to get this off the shelves, but also to bring attention to eating disorders. That's really interesting, because right now we're not seeing like a ton of healthcare workers come forward and talk about this, although I'm sure you can find someone on TikTok. But I would actually love to hear from them, like, what is the shift now? Again, I think what we're seeing now, the current drug is, of course, the GLP-1 situation, but what does abuse of that look like? And what is a better maybe monitoring system for that? Anyway, we'll get into it a little bit more in a sec. I feel like this is a very good time to take a quick little break. Go look at those photos if you want to. Go listen to a Carpenter song if you want to. We will be right back.
Ottawa's favorite tool event is back. Tool Fest, presented by Preston Hardware, is the ultimate destination for tool enthusiasts, hobbyists, and professionals. Get unbeatable deals on the latest tools, discounts up to 84% over 80 of North America's top manufacturers like Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, and Bosch. Free admission, free parking, plus over $200,000 in giveaways. It's where tool lovers gear up. Preston Hardware's Tool Fest, Infinity Convention Center, today and tomorrow, 9 to 4. Info at toolfest.ca.
And we're back. Okay. The Karen story doesn't give us some easy lesson where everyone should have just minded their business, but it also doesn't mean, I think, that a BBC interviewer interrogating her about weight on TV was somehow providing care. Also doesn't mean that it should have never been addressed. I can't imagine being so publicly questioned about something that was obviously so private and painful, right? Like, I can only imagine what a hit on her mental health that was in that moment. Now, Karen did eventually get intensive treatment in New York. Her illness involved severe food restriction, as well as we just touched on, misuse of meds, but also other laxatives too. Years of this illness put enormous stress on her body. As I mentioned, she did have a weak heart. On February 4th, 1983, she died at her parents' home in California. She was only 32. Her death was attributed to heart failure associated with the physical effects of anorexia. Now, her death changed everything. For millions of people, this was the first time they'd ever heard about anorexia. There was massive public interest now in eating disorders and getting this illness into mainstream awareness. So I do think it's understandable why Karen sort of still hangs over a conversation like the one we're having about Ariana. There is this really deeply embedded cultural memory, right, of watching a very famous woman get very sick in front of everyone's eyes, no one addressing it, and then her dying, right? There's something about that where I feel like everyone was watching it happen. No one was addressing it directly with her, or I don't know, getting her the help that she needed. And then she was gone. I think that's what scares me about the current moment. And I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable making this parallel with Ariana, but I feel like it's just the exact same thing. It's history repeating itself. And I know Jamila Jamil said this the other week, and she can be quite a lightning rod for saying things that perhaps she shouldn't, but I thought she was spot on. She said recently that it appears as if Ariana is dying. And when I saw her music video, I felt the same thing. And I've seen other photos and I've seen her concert performances. And that's what I'm seeing too. Like, it looks like this woman is at her last leg. And by the way, like, also performing while she's that sick on giant high heels, slowly moving through her choreography. I don't know how she's getting through it. Like, I'd be in bed for days. But anyway, now I do want to say, though, the similarity isn't just whatever it is that they're going through seemingly, right? We don't know for sure, but everything that's happening around them. So we're looking at these two people whose physical appearance is a really big conversation around their careers. But Ariana's living in this super different media environment. You know, Karen had interviewers. She had tabloids, certainly not to the level that they grew to be over the decades after, but Ariana has millions of people with screenshots, with video clips, TikToks. She's got all of social media. It's a very hungry, very big audience. So, Sarah, I'm going to hit you with the hardest question I think anybody's thinking about when it comes to this whole situation. What does being responsibly concerned look like in this situation?
Yeah, that's a good question, because here's the thing. I think if everyone felt Ariana had people who were taking care of her, maybe there wouldn't be so much public worry. And some people still would be, because obviously some people are in it for the Schadenfreude. And I think it's a little bit gross when it comes to someone's health, but I've enjoyed Schadenfreude in other ways, so I don't want to be too judgmental.
But see, that's even something that I think a lot of people, no one will admit to that. And I like that you put it that way.
Yeah. So I think that's, in some cases, it's Schadenfreude. I think a lot of the fans are genuinely concerned and are worried that she doesn't have people who are looking out for her best interests, because Ariana is a commodity, and just like Karen was a commodity. I mean, we mentioned it before, it's in some ways, even though it it's a different illness. It's very similar to when Britney Spears shaved her head. And some people were enjoying the Schadenfreude, and other people were thinking, is anyone taking care of this woman? This is a cry for help, right? And it did turn out, because Britney spent years and years trying to get out from under her family's thumb, and they were exploiting her, and they had a conservatorship, and it was awful. She had a lot of loyal fans who, it turned out, were there the whole time because they cared about her, right? That they really did care about her. And I don't know what percentage of fans it is for Ariana who genuinely care about her, but I think it's pretty high. I think there are a lot of people who just genuinely care about this woman and are worried because she's clearly deteriorating and she's not getting the help she deserves, the help she needs. Also, I mean, eating disorders, while there is some stigma, talking about your eating disorder and getting help for it as a pop star has become much more mainstream in recent years. So it is interesting to me that she won't talk about it, right? There's so many celebrities we can think of who've discussed their eating disorders publicly. Like, I mean, Demi Lovato, for example, lots of people who've done a really good job advocating for it. Even Taylor Swift I don't think she said she had an eating disorder, but talked about the pressure to be skinny when she was starting out in her career and how she was thinner than she wanted to be. And she was struggling to be that thin because she thought she had to look like a model. So this is the thing. It's clearly, we all see that you're struggling. Other pop stars have talked about how they struggled with eating and the pressure to be skinny. It just feels like if she's not addressing it, is she in denial?
This is where I get stuck too, because I know, and some of you are going to bring your pitchforks at me, but I wonder, what is the responsibility as a star who has such a big platform and has so many fans? And I know some of you are going to hate me for saying this, but they've got young fans. What is their responsibility, right? Because again, she doesn't owe it to us to tell her diagnosis. My bigger feeling is maybe she's not even admitted it to herself, right? Because anorexia is also a mental health issue, and she clearly has a lot of dysmorphia. So God knows how she's even processing it. And if she is even working on that, she might not be, she might be, we don't know. We know Karen Carpenter had a team of therapists and doctors. I don't know that Ariana has that, because you also have to be willing to get help and admitting it, right? And one thing that I wonder, at the beginning, I kept thinking, oh, it's her team who's just pushing her out there and not giving her a break. But Ariana might also be just saying, no, I want to go out and do this. I want to go on tour. I want to release this album. I want to make more music. I want to go do this play in London. She might be very well the person who's saying, I'm going to keep going. It does seem that way based on the way she talks about her career, that she's relatively in control. And that to me sounds like someone who also is not admitting to themselves what they're dealing with.
Well, eating disorders are, listen, they're multifaceted. When people say, do you remember in the 90s when people would say, it's not about your appearance, it's just about control? It's about lots of things, okay? Let's not be reductive and say it's not also about appearance. It's about controlling appearance. So in that aspect, it's all about control, but it's related because you're controlling that as opposed to something else you could control, like obsessively cleaning your room or something, right? Like there are lots of ways you can exercise control. So, I mean, it could be that she feels like this is how I prove I'm in control. I don't eat. I'm a workaholic too. But also, I do wonder if this is genuinely chosen or she's saying she chooses it. Because sometimes people say they choose things that they don't choose, right? We're seeing that a lot with the trad wife discourse, where you get a lot of these 18-year-olds being like, I chose this. I'm like, you're 18, did you? Right? And then 5 years later, they're divorced and they're like, I never chose this. So I'm just sort of wondering can someone freely choose to overwork themselves and be super unhealthy, or is that always, and I don't know, is that always a symptom of mental illness? Is that not? I'm not a psychiatrist. I would love to get a psychiatrist's perspective about whether you can freely choose things that are so harmful, or is that, according to doctors, a symptom of illness?
Yeah, that's such a good point, because here's the other thing. She probably employs like at least a few hundred people, right? So on the tour alone, that's hundreds of people. On the album, that's quite a lot of people who are involved with just putting that together. There's her regular team. There's the people who are involved with the music video. the stylists, the makeup person, the people behind the camera. Like, it's endless. You're so right. And I wonder if that's also a weight. And God, we can never forget the pressure that a pop star has, especially a female pop star, right? To keep going, to keep performing for us. There is a real strange discomfort I feel listening to her new album, which incidentally dropped during all of this, during the height of this, which I don't think is a coincidence, by the way. I don't think it's a coincidence that she may be at her sickest while she is doing the most work, right? And I think that's a parallel we have to think about. But I listen to, because I'm a big Ariana fan. I don't know if that comes across, but I love her and I love her music. And I'm listening to this album and I'm uncomfy because I feel like this person is sick in a weird way. It feels like they're a puppet for me to keep performing and going. And even though I'm sure in another way, of course it's catharsis to make music for her. That's her skill, that's her art, that's her passion. So that's great too. But I feel so many different things, right? It's so complicated. Let's get into a few of the examples you touched on, actually, Sarah, and a few others, because I think they can also shed a light on this and what might be going on for Ariana. Now, it's worth noting that Karen had another unintended effect on the way we do understand eating disorders. She became such a famous example of anorexia that she helped cement this very narrow cultural image of what an eating disorder can look like, right? So super thin, young, female, white. But of course, people with anorexia, with bulimia, so many other kinds of eating disorders exist in bodies of all different sizes. And that's another reason this idea that you could just look at someone and know what they're going through is so dangerous, right? Because a lot of the time you really can't. And I'll say, like, I've had friends who've been through this and I couldn't tell right away. There's some where I could, and there's others where I couldn't. And you can't always know. You can't always know. Now, after Karen, more famous women began openly describing the experiences they'd been keeping very secretive before because of what happened to her. They came forward. So I think that's another kind of beautiful silver lining in a way. But one of them was Jane Fonda. She talked about living with bulimia for decades, beginning when she was a teenager. She was and is an actress, right? She was also a major sex symbol at the time. And then in the 80s, we know she became the face of one of the biggest fitness empires ever. So millions of women were looking at her body as this aspirational ideal. But then privately, she's struggling with bulimia the entire time. She wrote in her book, My Life So Far, which is a fun read, by the way, she wrote, quote, like alcoholism, anorexia, and bulimia are diseases of denial. She said her husband, her kids, and her coworkers didn't know. Although I partially wonder if maybe they had feelings, but they just never asked her about it. But isn't that so damn striking, huh? And I think that's something to keep in mind. Anorexia and bulimia are diseases of denial. She wasn't even really facing it herself. So again, something I think that maybe sheds light on what Ariana's going through. Something to remember too, Jane Fonda, part of a very famous family, in front of a camera her whole life. So always had that pressure. And then having parents and a family who is so famous and all quite beautiful people, I can't even imagine that pressure. Good Lord. Okay, so we know that even people who are considered beautiful, basically, they're not protected from feeling terrible about the way they look. You can be the most gorgeous woman or man on earth, and you can still have body dysmorphia and not feel that way, right? I think I really want to hit that point home. In fact, sometimes I think it can even make the fixation even worse, but suddenly your appearance is connected to your livelihood in these cases. And I think for some folks, they will do anything to protect that. Because I think Jane's a good example of that, selling fitness VHS tapes and struggling at home. My God, I can't even imagine what that was like for her. Okay, I want to share a few other notable ones. Now, Princess Diana, who we love so much on this podcast, she had bulimia. She called it her secret disease. And then more recently, as Sarah mentioned, there was Demi Lovato, but I also want to talk more about Taylor Swift, who you also mentioned. Now, in her Netflix documentary, Miss Americana, she talked about being triggered by seeing photos where she thought her stomach looked too big, or seeing speculation that she might be pregnant and then restricting food. She also talked about doing these massive shows and thinking that feeling faint or depleted after was normal. And I bet there's so many pop stars who go through the same thing. How scary. Now, at one point she says in the documentary, quote, "I would have defended it to anybody who said I'm concerned about you." I feel like that is such a rare revealing comment from Taylor. She's never really quite that candid. I feel like that is so, it tells us a lot. And I bet it was really meaningful for a lot of women watching this, right?
I think it really was. And here's the thing with women, it's so easy to have an eating disorder and have no one intervene. I mean, sometimes if you're lucky, you get intervention, but no one really takes care of women's health. No one really cares that much about the way women look after their bodies, right? I mean, there's a lot of research that shows that adult women are often in charge of a lot of other people's health, right? I mean, they will look after kids, their parents. If they have a husband, they typically have to look after his health. If you haven't watched All Her Fault, there's a brilliant ending where a woman just stops taking care of a man's health and he dies. It's a way a woman could literally kill her husband by just not being the one there to save his life, right? And it's quite fun. I highly recommend All Her Fault, but it does illuminate how women know everything about, like, men don't even know what kind of medication they take oftentimes. If they've been married for 40 years, they often don't know what it is. And if their wife dies, like, that's a serious health problem for a man in his 70s or 80s. Like, he will soon die too for some stupid reason, probably because he doesn't know how to take care of himself or his doctor's phone number. But when you're a woman, you can just easily say things like, oh, I'm not hungry at dinner. I already ate. And no one checks up on you because no one cares that much about your health. And so if you say that every night, people probably won't notice the pattern. Like, if you were any woman I know who's married to a man, if he came home and was drunk every single night, was like, I went for after work drinks, she would notice the pattern and be like, you used that excuse last night, you used it the night before. Do you have a drinking problem? Right? She would notice and comment. If you said to your husband, I had a big lunch every single day for 6 months, he'd be like, she just loves a big lunch. He actually probably wouldn't remember that you loved a big lunch, I have to say, because men are not trained they're not socialized to look after other people's health. This is actually, I'm not saying that all men are crap. I'm saying this is the way we don't socialize men to notice what other people are doing. And so that's why, as a woman, if you want to get better and you have an eating disorder, it's so sad, but pretty much 100% of the time you have to take responsibility for that. No one is coming to save you, which is so unfair. Women's health is so much work. And on top of that, you're already taking care of everyone else's health too. So when do you get around to yourself?
I mean, that's true. That's true. And in many cases, and I think, God, we're looking at these women who are such big stars, right? And then, as we mentioned, they employ so many people. So they're also at the top of the food chain. And in this case, if that person is telling you, I'm fine, I'm good, you're going to just go with it, right? A lot of the time, I have to assume. Sometimes you've got a good team, they step in, they help you out. But, like, if we zoom out a little bit, because I think a lot about, we mentioned Demi Lovato and Taylor too, like, they start out very young. And when I think of Demi Lovato, we look at the Nickelodeon and Disney stars who have been through so much hell, and we've seen quite a few of them go through episodes of disordered eating and probably body dysmorphia, and we've seen it in front of our eyes. We know from so much now at this point, and that great documentary on Nickelodeon Behind the Scenes from last year, but that they don't have that protection, right? And there's nobody coming to save them either, and in fact are maybe influencing a lot of this. And that's scary to me too. And then if that's happening when you're so young and it stays and it sticks, when do you change the pattern? Like, Demi Lovato alone has been through so much. I think it's amazing she's even here, which she said herself. So Taylor, I think, is such a great example too, because she is someone who I think is used a lot as the face of perfection and like someone who's successful and has never struggled. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so appreciative that she shared this, because I also think it's relatable as just a regular woman, right? Who's not a star, right? Like, I have been there too, where I felt like, oh God, I'll look back at photos and I'll be like, how do I look like that? God. And this idea that if anybody even came to you and asked you about it, you just be like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. Like, we've all been there. And I think hearing it from someone of this level is huge, which is another reason, again, why I do think when these women open up and they share about what they're going through, it is so impactful. Yes, they don't owe us an explanation. However, they have a lot of fans, and those fans hear this and then they can speak up and they can kind of figure out what's going on for them. Am I going through something similar? So I think that's something. I also feel like the Taylor quote, all of these really from Demi, from Princess Diana, even, it shows us there was this shift, right? And the way that Hollywood talks about body image, because this is a pop star who grew up during one of the toughest eras of body scrutiny, right? And so I think that's probably one of the biggest shifts we've seen since Karen, and also because of Karen. Now, I do want to touch on this, and Sarah addressed a little bit earlier, but up until recently, I think it really did feel like mainstream beauty standards were broadening, right? So for a good while there, body positivity was a thing. Fashion became at least somewhat more size inclusive, kind of. Celebrities started challenging magazines for retouching them. People started calling out fat phobia. But now, very suddenly, I also feel the pendulum has swung scarily back. Ultra thin bodies are aspirational again. It feels like we're in the Kate Moss era, honestly, right? Like, that's even smoking is considered sexy again, which is so wild.
Yes, everyone is going to be thin and they're going to have lung cancer. So that sounds like a fun, brave new world.
I know. Yeah, we've entered the GLP-1 era. Social media means everybody's more exposed, right? That's another thing. So on social media, we're talking about pop stars, but if you're on social, you're also being viewed very often, if not every day. Listen, it's hard for me to post a selfie on social, and then I see people who will post one every day. And that can have an impact too. Then you're even more conscious of what you look like and how people are perceiving you. These are key changes we've got to think about. You know, there's no question we're living through this period when quick and dramatic weight loss is so much more visible. So, you know, when people look around Hollywood and they think, why does everyone suddenly seem so thin? I don't think that's a completely invented observation, right? Ariana is only one example. Olivia Wilde also looks alarmingly thin right now. Jenna Ortega, countless women are looking thinner than ever.
A lot of women. And I have to say, like, it's anybody who can afford it. It is very popular in circles that can afford it. I was at this hotel that is popular with wealthy people from New York in January. So I don't know if anyone follows this woman, her on Instagram, One Lip Mama. She is like, I don't know, her whole thing is like she's basically Serena Vanderwoodson IRL. Like, she married this rich guy she met in high school at her private school. Anyway, she was posting about going to this hotel. It's called Palm Heights. I was there in January and saw all these like New York socialite ladies. The lack of body diversity made me quite confident a lot of people are on Ozempic. There was not one single person who looked to me on the beach to be above a size 6, which, if you have a normal cross section of humanity, is never the case, right? It's never the case that you have zero body diversity, that everyone is on the thin side, right? I'm not saying anyone looked bad. I'm not trying to body shame anyone. It was just very obvious that pretty much everyone was taking it, and that statistically speaking, probably some people were taking it who absolutely did not need it, but wanted to be super, super skinny, right? Like, it's just very obvious when, you know, you see the restaurant is having a hard time selling food. Right? And it's not like it's anybody's budget that's precluding them from buying food, but they're just like, I have no room in my stomach, right? Like, it was a nice hotel and the restaurant was not super busy. And I sort of thought, okay, this is a really interesting study on the fact that everyone who can afford it is on Ozempic. I think I was one of 2 people there who weren't on Ozempic. I mean, I wasn't on Ozempic. I mean, no one in my family, to my knowledge, was on it. But like, very few people there seemed to be presenting there was no body diversity, I should say. So that is alarming, right? It does actually, when you see Hollywood do this, rich people follow suit, and then eventually it trickles down and you get a lot of middle class people and lower middle class people sacrificing things they probably need in order to pay for skinniness, right?
That's a really good point. I have never thought about it that way, actually, because you're right. That drop down style of trend is still so alive. Oh, that is a really good point. Well, more to it. Let's touch on some more examples. So here's a really timely one. Kaya Gerber. So she's the model daughter of Cindy Crawford, looks eerily just like her mother. Very good model, very bad actress, but that's a story for another time. Now, she also recently shared that she's experienced disordered eating in her life. She talked very openly about her experience. She said, quote, negativity has never saved someone's life. I think that's a good reminder that, you know, one thing to tell someone they don't look well, whole other thing to actually offer some support and concern. Now, there's another major way this conversation has evolved since Karen Carpenter. We're finally hearing more from men. In fact, I would say this is a very recent shift, literally as of the last few months. Now, a majority of people with eating disorders are female, but it's also true that a growing number of boys, men, and gender nonconforming people are also living with disordered eating. With the National Eating Disorders Association estimating that about 1 in 3 people struggling with an eating disorder is male. That's pretty big. And, I wonder if this is something that also is in line with other difficult things to talk about where men just don't report a lot of the time too, right? So something to consider. Now, Zayn Malik has talked about going long stretches without properly eating during his One Direction days. He described food as one of the few things that he felt he could control during a really chaotic period. And sorry, you mentioned this earlier, but food being one thing that a star can control, I think is such a key thing for a lot of these people. I do think a lot of the time what Zayn said is what a lot of these people are going through. Ed Sheeran, too, has talked about binge eating and purging and about comparing his body to other male pop stars. And now this is the really big recent example, and I'm so proud of him for sharing this because it couldn't have been easy. But Riverdale star KJ Apa, who of course played Archie, he said just weeks ago, quote, anything that makes me feel good, I will abuse. It's something that I've learned about myself. Even eating, my relationship with eating, especially on that show, was bad. So he was recalling memories of binge eating and purging on the set of Riverdale. He recalled how he ordered a large amount of food from McDonald's and urinated on it in an attempt to leave it unfinished to stop himself from eating. But he got to the point where he just couldn't even resist it. So he said, quote, I go throw up all the food that I ate. I go back outside about 20 minutes later after lying there in bed being like, ugh, I'm hungry again because all the food is now out of my body. I went downstairs, I go outside, and it's there, right? I start eating around the piss. I eat the rest of the food and I left the soaking piss food there. Now, I know that's a really tough and dark example, but I do feel like a lot of the time this is what it can look like, and we don't talk about it, and people don't want to talk about it, understandably why. It's so devastating. I was sad to see this didn't get more coverage, actually. Like, this is a very recent interview. It's huge for a male star to come forward like this, and I do think it can be the difference in helping other young boys at home feel seen and hopefully seek help. Like, this is a brutal way. He was putting himself through so much mental torture, right? And lest we forget, Riverdale, very, very big show, very popular. That entire cast, very young, pushed in front of the spotlight, had a really hard time. I know Lily Reinhardt, who's also on the show, she's talked about really struggling with her body too in front of the cameras. And I think this also just goes to show like things can look so glamorous on the outside, but look at what he was dealing with on the inside. And I don't know, it just really breaks my heart. So, again, keeping in mind, eating disorders in men don't conform necessarily to the Karen Carpenter image, right? The pressure might be in this case to be lean, to be muscular, to exercise compulsively, which are also behaviors that can easily get celebrated as discipline or fitness. And that's scary, right? Because that's also such an easy way to sort of mask what you're going through. And you can say this is all for fitness and for my health, but you can also be addicted to a lot of those elements, right? I've seen people go through this close to me, and it's scary to see. So, sir, I want to know from you, why do you think right now, like literally in these maybe this past year, men are coming forward, and also this crop of younger men are opening up about this? We haven't really seen this before.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I guess that's a good sign. Although it seems like as they are becoming more enlightened about eating disorders, women are now experiencing more pressure to develop them. So I'm happy for the men, but I'm upset that it doesn't seem like women are becoming more able to confront their eating disorders in public. It's the opposite for women. So, I mean, okay, it's interesting. What do you make of this?
No, I'm with you. It's a double-edged sword. And even then, it's like we're putting these silver linings on these very dark things, right? Like, it's still a lot of men who are probably going through this and will never feel comfortable enough to say anything, not forget in public, but to their people and their families and their friends, right? And in terms of getting help. I think it's a lot to do with this younger generation, and it gives me a lot of hope because I think with these, I was going to say with these kids, they're not kids anymore, but like this generation is very online. So on one hand, they are really at risk, and we're already seeing the impact of that. A lot of these, not these stars specifically, but if we're talking about Gen Z and even younger, some of Gen Z grew up during the COVID period, and a lot of these kids have grown up entirely online. That means that they're very different in the way they communicate and their interest in the way they make friends. We know for a lot of them, their closest friends they met online, they have online. There's so much literature even just about the way that this generation has sex and how that's shifted because they're a digital generation. So I think on the one hand, that makes me worry for them because online, that's the scariest place when it comes to assessing body image, right? And then on the other hand, they also seem a little more cognizant of why it's important to talk about it and get help. They talk much more about mental health than any of our other generations ever had as millennials and anyone else beyond that, right? So I think that's a really good sign. I think of Zayn because as a One Direction fan, as a Zayn fan, he was the first one to leave the band. And he had a lot of anxiety when he was in that band. And I think he struggled with being so public. And as we later found out, he also was struggling with disordered eating. And how brave of him to be able to leave the band when they were at their height. And he got a lot of shit for it from fans, right? And still does. And I think that's very bold. And I can't imagine how he did that. Like, that must have been very difficult to do that. Because I remember in the era of like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, I don't think that would have ever happened with those guys, right? And you look now, like, let's look at Cat's Eye, this huge K-pop band. 2 of the women have left the band at this point, and maybe will return, maybe won't. It seems like they're also struggling with the pressure and the anxiety. We never would have seen that 10 years ago.
Yeah, fair enough. And good for them. Good for this younger generation being more aware of their mental health and not just succeeding at all costs, which I feel like was very much a millennial thing, was just like rise and grind. Until Ye was canceled, his song Stronger, I would have said, was very much the theme song of the millennial generation, right? Because we suffered so much, I have to say. And every generation has had challenges, but we suffered at these very key moments in our lives that I think really just are quite traumatic. I mean, we grew up with lots of wars. And then once we graduated into recession. A lot of us became parents in a global pandemic, right? The economy just never improved. But we had a ton as a generation of student debt because we've been told growing up the one thing that would make you employable was education. Turned out not true. ChatGPT has your education. It has your master's degree in English history. You didn't need it. So I do think that we were sold this idea that hard work would save us, right? If we just were the hardest working people, we would all be successful. And Gen Z either wasn't sold that or they knew it wasn't true because they could watch their older cousins or older siblings fail, even though they had multiple master's degrees, right? They could watch all of us fail. They had the benefit of social media and seeing that too, seeing us fail publicly on, Instagram. So I guess maybe they just understand it's not worth it to push yourself. I know a lot of millennials are kind of judgy and think that they don't have a work ethic. And I mean, maybe we did have a better work ethic, but it didn't help us. So who cares?
Exactly. I'm so with you because God knows I have judged this gen at some points for being like, get it together. But they're actually onto something. And God, I am one of those millennials who still will work till I kill myself. So like, it is what it is. And I do think they're onto something and they might be better off than the rest of us. So yay to these men. And I hope this keeps happening, that if you are struggling and especially if you've gotten to the point where you've worked through some of it and you feel comfortable enough sharing, hell yeah, man. I want to remind anybody who's listening again that we've got resources linked in the show notes. If you need that, please check it out, whether you are a man or a woman or whoever you might be. Give them a look. Okay, this feels like a good time to take another break. We will be right back.
Ottawa's favorite tool event is back. Tool Fest, presented by Preston Hardware, is the ultimate destination for tool enthusiasts, hobbyists, and professionals. Get unbeatable deals on the latest tools, discounts up to 84%, over 80 of North America's top manufacturers like Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, and Bosch. Free admission, free parking, plus over $200,000 in giveaways. It's where tool lovers gear up. Preston Hardware's Tool Fest, Infinity Convention Center, today and tomorrow, 9 to 4. Info at toolfest.ca.
And we're back. Okay, after all of that, have we actually improved since Karen Carpenter died? Yeah, I think, in a lot of ways, obviously, but also maybe not nearly as much as we want to believe. Now, in Karen's era, most people barely understood anorexia. We've established that. By Diana's era, you could publicly say, I have bulimia, and it was revolutionary. By Demi and Taylor's era, celebs could talk much more openly about treatment and recovery, which is huge. And now we're seeing men are increasingly part of the conversation too. We get that eating disorders affect people of different genders, ages, races, body types. This is real progress. It is. It really is. But at the same time, we've created a surveillance machine. Again, we've got social media. We've got this whole moving body that can see everybody at all times. And it's something that Karen Carpenter could never have imagined. I don't know how she would handle that. Instead of one journalist asking an invasive question on TV, you got millions of people who can freeze frame your body at any time and make 16-part TikTok series analyzing what might be happening, or you get two people on a podcast talking about it. Ultimately, what I'm saying is, I don't think we should be as focused on what's going on with Ariana as we should be on why we're living through another era in which extreme thinness has cultural currency again. I hate it. I'm really angry about it. I'm bitter about it. What does Hollywood fashion and social media algorithms reward? It is this all over again. Karen Carpenter's death shocked people because an illness the public barely understood had been unfolding in front of millions of them. Now, 43 years later, we have almost the opposite problem. We know the terminology. We know about anorexia and bulimia. We know about diet culture, body dysmorphia, and disordered eating. Karen's generation suffered partly because the public barely knew how to talk about all of this, but I don't want ours to become a generation that understands how serious all of this is, but is also so scared of acknowledging it. That's still being upheld. And I struggle with that part. Just not saying anything, keeping it all secret, acting like it's not happening. It seems like that's the only acceptable response. And I think that's really alarming. There's one other reason I do want to end with Karen here. She deserves to be remembered as so much more than the famous woman who died of anorexia. She was, again, a phenomenal musician, a drummer, one of the most recognizable voices of her generation. Now, unfortunately, eating disorders can consume somebody's life. Hers also consumed her legacy. It's a lot to wrap our heads around, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Again, for copyright reasons, we can't play out to Karen Carpenter. But again, please check out some of the music that we'll link to. And Sarah, I want to say for our hindsight's 2026 moment, we're going to remix it again this week. But I just want to know, what do you think the lesson is here? How do we make sure we don't have another Karen? Ariana Grande is 33 years old. Karen was 32 when she passed. There's reasons we're making this parallel. So how do we make sure we don't have another repeat episode?
I don't know. I mean, we'd have to completely transform our culture, and we haven't done that. So, I mean, I think we need to treat women's health more seriously on a broad scale, because I think that there are a lot of things that we neglect, all the way from eating disorders to cancers that predominantly affect women to endometriosis, right? So I think part of it is that we just don't seem to be preoccupied by things that affect women in a major way, and the majority of people who suffer from eating disorders are women. I liked the body diversity that we had a few years ago. It hadn't completely eliminated eating disorders by any means, but I felt like we were headed in a good direction. And now we've just completely gone the other way. It's almost worse than the heroin chic of the 90s, because at least in the 90s, while that was considered the most beautiful body type, most people understood they couldn't do it. And so it wasn't normal. Now, because of GLP-1, not only is being in a larger body stigmatized as being less beautiful, but now there's this weird classist element that is starting to develop, right? Where if you see someone in a larger body, I think a lot of people would say, oh, why aren't they on Ozempic? I guess they can't afford it, right? Like you're seeing, I've read a little bit about this, about how we're starting to see classism, which is always intersected with body type, but it's now becoming starker. So I would really love to see a whole transformation of our culture on many levels, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So sorry to be a downer. What about you?
No, I think that's the reality of it. And I'm so glad you bring up the class perspective because I think that is so true. And, listen, culture is cyclical and the pendulum is going to swing back around. I hope it's sooner than later, but it just went the other way. I'm so with you. I have a lot of feelings about no longer having, the body positivity movement was already complicated in itself. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than where we are now again. So I do hope we can get back there, maybe even with an even more nuanced perspective, hopefully, but we end up learning a lesson each time. So hopefully, regardless, that's going to end up happening. But I think the other thing that I will add is if we've hit home anything this episode, I hope it's the fact that since it's been around, since we've known about it, anorexia, any kind of disordered eating, any kind of body dysmorphia, these things have been considered silent diseases. And like Jane said, they're diseases of denial. And I think Princess Diana called it like her secret. A lot of these people, it's their secret. So they don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to admit it to themselves. Sometimes the rest of the world doesn't want to say it out loud because it feels like you shouldn't be. That's not politically correct. But fuck politically correct. Sometimes we got to have those conversations. If you don't feel comfy posting it on your Instagram or your TikTok, that's fine. But I do think it's healthy to have the conversations at the dinner table with your friends over a glass of wine in the group chat. Talk about it. Talk about how it's making you feel. Those things are really important. We might not be able to get Ariana the help we need personally, but we can talk to each other and give each other support. I think that's the biggest thing, is that if you're also going to come to someone and say, I'm worried about you, look up the ways you can have that conversation. We will link to dialogue that you can use if you're worried about a friend. And also, again, you can reshare any of the resources we're providing too. I think that's the big thing. Let's not be so quiet. We have to talk about it. This is the thing that's repeating. Yet again, that's something we can change this time. So that's us. That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you to everybody who's listening today. You can listen to more of The Reheat for free on the Seeker app. You can also find the show on the Frequency Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Instagram at Canada Whore. Sarah, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me at Sahagi and Sarah on Instagram and Threads. And if you liked this podcast, something you can actually do, it costs no money, is to rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. It helps them figure out who we are. If you would like us to keep growing and you have the capacity to do so, one thing that you could really do to help us make the show more sustainable in the long term is to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thereheat. We're working on some fun travel guides for you. We're going to have one for London. We're going to have some others. So if you like to travel and you like celebrity culture, because there will be celebrity references in these guides, this is a really good investment. So no matter what, thank you for listening. It really makes our day when we see our downloads. So thank you so much for making us a small part of your lives.
Yeah, can I just add, we've grown so much, guys. The Reheat has grown so beautifully. This is 5 years for us. And speaking of, we'll be announcing something special soon involving that. Thank you for sticking around with us, especially if you've been around from the beginning. That's it from us. Bye.
Bye.